everybody, welcome back. So we're going to set up our play area and just do some kind of beautification stuff in our scene here. So the first thing I want to do is on our paddle. Let's swap out this UI sprite. I went and made some sprites just in Photoshop, just real simple little things. It's just a white rectangle and a black rectangle, one for my paddle and one for the wall. And I'm going to take those and I'm going to import them into my project. So on my desktop, just select both of those images and drag them into your project window. And those will go ahead and import. And I'm going to organize my project folder here. So I'm going to make a new folder called sprites. And then the same thing, I'm going to drag both of those in there. On my import settings, so with these guys selected, I need to double check that the texture type is set for a sprite. These are single sprites, so later when we get to more complex games and having animation and sprite sheets and stuff like that, we'll change some of this information, but this is all pretty good for right now. So then on my paddle, I'm going to swap out that UI sprite for my paddle sprite. That's going to change some things because the paddle sprite is a specific size and we've messed with our scale last video. So let's drop this down back to 1 for all of the scale axes. And then we can zoom out and let's start making the boundaries for our game. So again, I'm going to create another new sprite. So that plus button, 2D object sprite. This I will call my left wall. And then for the sprite, I'll put in that wall sprite. And then this one we are going to mess around with. Before I move anything, I want to make sure that the position here gets reset. And so on the transform component, on those 3 dots, let's go and reset the position of this. Whenever you make something new, the position gets placed in the center of the scene view, and so sometimes those are all like non-zero values there for position. And so now I can go get my move tool, or you can press W on your keyboard, it's the shortcut for that. And let me scooch this over. Let's see, maybe a good round number, maybe like -15. And I want to scale this. I want to rotate this as well. So the keyboard shortcut is E. But really I'm just going to rotate it on the Z axis 90 degrees. And then I can use the scale tool, or R, to stretch this out just kind of as high as I want it. Let's play around a little bit. So how far should we go? So we want to have a number of blocks up here eventually. So maybe like a scale of 15 on the X. And then on the position, the thing is I don't want the ball to be able to get too far past my player, and I don't want the player to be able to go on the other side of that wall either. So let's put my Y at 10. That looks good. We want the ball to be able to collide and bounce off of these walls, so before we duplicate these, let's consolidate our work and let's add a box collider. So I clicked on the Add Component button, I'm typing in box, and this needs to be a box collider 2D. Everything we're doing right now is with 2D and 3D colliders don't talk to each other. So make sure you're selecting the box collider 2D. It will wrap around that sprite automatically for us, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to duplicate my left wall. So right click duplicate or Command D. Let's rename that to the right wall, and then for the X value just take off that negative sign and it'll go and we'll have a symmetrical game space. And then let's duplicate it one more time. We'll call this our top wall. Let's set our X value for position to 0, and then the Z rotation, take that rotation off back to 0 as well. And then we can again play with this. Now these colliders can overlap because there's not much going on with them otherwise. So just kind of place that up on top. That, like I said, that can overlap a little bit, but I want to bring in the scale some so that that doesn't hang off. So I'm changing my scale X. I'm clicking on that X value and dragging that in to maybe something like 14. And that looks pretty good. There's a little bit of jaggedness, but that's okay. It does not have to be perfect. Now our paddle also has to have a box collider so that the ball can bounce off of it as well. So the same thing, come to add component, box collider 2D. And now we need to set some bounds in our player controller script. So open that back up. Now the first thing I want to do is to add some more variables. So I will make 2 new public variables, and they are floats. And I can name these left bound and right bound. And I'm going to use those values in the update function to limit how far left and right the paddle can go. So we're going to do transform.position equals, and because transform.position has 3 values, x, y, z, we're going to use a vector 3, but to do that we have to tell it that it's a new vector 3. We have to use that keyword. So vector 3, and then I'm going to do some formatting to make this easier for us to read. This needs an open and close parentheses. I'm going to go before that and press return or enter to bring these down a little bit. And so normally, like we do with the translate, we can have these all in one row, but I want to have a line for the X, a line for the Y, and a line for the Z, because this is going to get pretty long and it would just go on and on and on and on all the way to the right. So for my X value, I'm going to use a function called mathf. There's a whole lot of math functions in here. So dot, but the one we're going to use is clamp. So we're going to clamp from one value to the next. So the first argument that this takes is the value that we are going to be clamping. So this one is going to be transform.position.x, and then we need to say how low it can go, which is going to be our left bound, and then another comma, and then how high it can go, which is our right bound. And we're going to find out those values later, and in the inspector we're going to input those in so that we can get kind of precise values there. Alright, and that's really the only thing that we're clamping. So the rest of these, so that's the X value, the Y value is just going to be transform.position.y, and then the same thing for Z, transform.position.z. So this is one big line of code. At the end we need that semicolon, and then we'll save this and head back to Unity. Okay, so for right now, on our player controller script, that left bound and our right bound came in. They're both set to 0. So if we go and try to play this right now, we're back to not being able to move because we're clamped at 0. So if we change that left bound to some value, let's see how far over we need to be able to go. More than that. So let's see how far over we need to go. Our left wall is actually at X is minus 15. So that's what we can put in first, just to see what happens. So I'm just going to do both, minus 15 and 15 for left and right respectively. Back to my game view, how far over does that go? Okay, so that gets me to the edge of the wall, but we don't want to be able to go through the wall. So that needs to come down just a little bit. Now, as I decrease this right bound, you can see that it gets pushed over just a little bit. And so let's try like 13.5. And no, not quite enough. Maybe 13.75. That looks perfect. Awesome. That is right up against there. And so I need to make that adjustment on my left bound as well, but I'm in play mode, so it's all going to get erased anyway. So I'll exit play mode. So minus 13.75 for the left, 13.75 for the right, and we are good to go. In the first video, I neglected to save our scene, and honestly my computer crashed in between these videos and I lost everything, so I had to redo it all. Unity gives us this sample scene to start with. That can be confusing a little bit for new people, especially if you close your editor and come back and it pops up with a blank scene. You're like, hey, where's my stuff? I've had that happen with my students before. So let's save this off as its own scene. So File, Save As. And in our Scenes folder, let's just call this Breakout, and we'll save that. And now we are all done. So our play area is all set up. We can move our player left and right within the bounds of the game. In the next video, we will create our ball and let it bounce around our scene. So join me then.